If you listen to most Republicans across the country right now, they desperately want Donald Trump to focus on the issues like the economy or even the border. But if you look at Trump's social media, he is clearly not listening. Today, he shared a flood of content full of QAnon references, calls for jailing lawmakers and the special counsel investigating him, and a sexually crude comment that was quite inappropriate about Vice President Harris. Meanwhile, the former president is facing major controversy over a visit to Arlington National Cemetery that happened earlier this week. Here's Garrett Hake with more.
Tonight, the Trump campaign is defending the candidate's Monday visit to Arlington National Cemetery, now being criticized for politicizing America's war dead on hallowed ground.
What a horrible day it was.
The campaign on Tuesday posting this TikTok highlight video of Trump's trip, showing him laying a wreath in honor of the service members killed at Abbey Gate in Afghanistan and posing with family members among the gravestones. Several campaign staff posting their own content, too.
It's disrespectful. It's not Disney World. It's Arlington National Cemetery, and it should be respected as such.
The visit first drawing scrutiny after a reported altercation between campaign and cemetery staff over photography. The Trump campaign saying a staffer, quote, decided to physically block members of President Trump's team during a very solemn ceremony. A cemetery spokesperson writing, federal law prohibits political campaign or election-related activities within Army National Military cemeteries. Arlington National Cemetery reinforced and widely shared this law and its prohibitions with all participants. The Harris campaign calling it all a sad episode, saying Trump has a, quote, history of demeaning and degrading military service members. The vice president herself has not commented on the incident. Trump running mate J.D. Vance responding late today.
She wants to yell at Donald Trump because he showed up. She can go to hell.
Kelly Barnett invited the former president to Arlington. Her son, Marine Staff Sergeant Taylor Hoover, died at Abbey Gate.
What would you say to people who may be pro-Trump, anti-Trump, whatever their politics might be, who just feel like that's not a place for politicians or for politics?
I would have to say, are you in my shoes? I invited him. My son was murdered under the Biden-Harris administration.
Utah Governor Spencer Cox, attending with Trump, posting these photos. He later apologized for using them in a fundraising email.
And tonight, the New York Times reports it got a statement from the family of a Green Beret, Sergeant Andrew Marchinsano, who is buried in the same section of the cemetery where one of the photos was taken. They say they did not give their permission. Joining me now, Basil Schmeichel, Democratic strategist and former executive director of the New York State Democratic Party. He is now an MSNBC political analyst and Columbia University professor. And Susan Del Percio, a veteran Republican strategist, as well as an MSNBC political analyst. Thank you both for being here. You know, Susan, the soldiers that are laid to rest at Arlington National Cemetery, they did not fight for a political party. They did not fight for an allegiance to a particular president. They fought for all of us. And when I saw this unfold and everything that's happened in the aftermath, to me, it feels like this is just another example of our norms eroding right in front of us, doesn't it?
It's an example of Donald Trump's blatant disregard and I think sometimes hatred of our country for not understanding how people could fight and protect our country and that has zero respect for them, Simone. How he could possibly and the campaign think they could get away with disregarding the rules of Arlington Cemetery is a slap in the face to every American, not just those who are Gold Star family members, but especially to those who are, in fact, I mean, it highlights them and their service. And as the reporting shows tonight, there are members who are upset that their family members were used in this way. Again, showing a sacred location of the cemetery being used for political purposes. Only someone like Donald Trump, who has no respect for the military, could possibly do this.
You know, the family of the Green Beret, Sergeant Marchinsano, they said no one asked their permission. And I think that's a very important point, that this is not just people's families are buried here, heroes, people who lost their lives in service of our country. And Basil, that is what the Arlington officials reiterated. They said that any campaign-related activities inside are against federal law, period, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, or whomever. Now, Republicans say that they are the law and order party, yet this campaign just can't seem to follow a pretty basic federal law. And it just feels like they're inviting more issues as it relates to service members and veterans. What is really going on here?
Well, you know, Simone, you and Susan, I have worked for elected officials. And just because you can do a thing doesn't mean you should do a thing. And that is really what the Donald Trump campaign and his circle of friends and supporters, that seems to be their MO. It doesn't matter if we can do it or we should do it. If we can do it, let's just do it and deal with the repercussions later. And in fact, let's not deal with the repercussions later. Let's just fundraise off of it. And the only reason that he would even pause for a moment to consider the ramifications of what he does is if it somehow chips away at his fame. You know, so I agree with everything that Susan said, that this has never been about respect for the military, because he's diminished and talked ill of the military and the generals. If you remember going back to 2016, this is really just about a campaign stop. And look, for whatever reason the family said, I want you to visit the grave, that's fine. But any one of us would have probably said, yeah, I'll do that, but I'm not going to take pictures there. I'm not going to take video there. I'm certainly not going to let an ally of mine use it as a fundraising tool. And then you go off and do something else. But you know, there are no boundaries. And that is where we are in this country with Donald Trump. No boundaries, no rules. We do it because we can. And imagine how that impacts other policies going forward.
I mean, truly, there is a way to have honored the Gold Star mother's request while also honoring the law and the other families who have loved ones buried at Arlington National Cemetery. This is not happening in a vacuum, though. This comes just after Donald Trump took a lot of backlash for his comments about Medal of Honor recipients. Susan, my question is about voters. How are voters going to react to yet another headline showing Donald Trump in this light when it comes to our men and women in uniform?
Well, it goes back to your first question, Simone, are we a little all too numb to Donald Trump's antics? And I think when we hear what happened today, we all may have a view through a patriotic viewpoint or even a political viewpoint. But the fact is that the voters hear this. They know that this is what Donald Trump is like. I don't think he wins votes or loses votes. It just reaffirms whatever you think about Donald Trump. But it does open the door for the Harris-Walz team to step in and talk about how things should be done properly, how we've had enough of this man degrading our service members. I mean, it started off with him talking about John McCain, saying he doesn't like people who get captured. I mean, it's gone downhill since then. And that's why I think when you look at the Harris-Walz campaign and how they choose to respond delicately, they don't go over the top like Donald Trump, but they make their point known, and it shows the public, yeah, we should be done with this guy.
Yeah, and to Garrett's point in the package, Vice President Harris has yet to weigh in on this. I would bet my bottom dollar she will be asked in this interview that she's going to do tomorrow. I want to switch gears to talk about Donald Trump's social media feed. QAnon, threats, crude comments and inappropriate comments about Vice President Harris and Secretary Clinton, frankly. Do you think that his campaign team, Basil, is desperately trying to hide his phone right now? The posts are not helping him with voters in Michigan or Pennsylvania, but also the man wants to be president of the United States of America. How can anyone think this is appropriate?
Well, most of us don't think it's appropriate. I'd say the vast majority of the country doesn't think it's appropriate, but he does, and he thinks he can rally his base by posting these things and explain it away, even if he chooses not to, that his base will still be there and behind him. And actually, you know, this relates to your question to Susan, because there are often times when I think, are we so inured in our country, desensitized in our country, that these things don't matter to a lot of voters, that, you know, gun violence just kind of rolls off rolls off our back, where before it was weeks or certainly days and weeks of coverage, but now we are so desensitized and inured to all of this mess. But what the Harris-Walz campaign has proved with the enthusiasm is that no, campaigns can be restorative. They can actually bring back the kind of feelings and values and understanding of what normalcy really is in our governance. And so when you look at the kinds of things that Donald Trump is tweeting, that's why the Tim Walz comment about it being weird, about him being weird, really hits home, because it's like, we don't do that. That's something that we shouldn't take for granted. It's something that we shouldn't become accustomed to. And that's I think why you saw the kind of enthusiasm over the last month that we have.